I jotted down some shilas. I want to do a little bit different today because I started the shiur. This style of the shiur was to follow. There's a Dayan Raskin from London, Chabad Dayan, who I feel makusha to, and he does this. He gives a shiur like I think Motzei Shabbos, and it's just random shilas, and I was into that. But I realized that I sort of stopped quoting things. I just started talking. But I wanted to get back a little bit to the Makaris. I mean, everything I said, I'd like to think there were sources for, but I'm going to give some Makaris for it, so we give a little more validity. Again, we'll run through the shilas as we do every week. We'll take questions at the end of each shilah. So shilah number 1. Bez Hashem, this coming Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, I'm sure you guys have seen, we're going to be doing... Bye, Gavin. We're going to be doing this. Look at that. We're going to be doing this making tzitzis for the chayalim. I think it's definitely a nice thing to do. Again, it's to do a mitzvah b'yadayim for a soldier is definitely a chashav azach, and it's really a mitzvah that the soldiers have accepted upon themselves pretty strongly. I know of a couple soldiers that are not religious, but they're wearing tzitzis, and tzitzis protects. It's bechlal in Inyan. You may not be mechuyev to wear tzitzis at night, but b'chlal you're not mechuyev to wear tzitzis at all min haTorah, because tzitzis is only if you have a 4-cornered beged, then you have to put it on. You don't have to put on a 4-cornered beged. It's a rabbinic mitzvah, but the Gemara says that it protects. It protects from the shas hashmad. It protects. So it's definitely a mitzvah that protects. So it's definitely a nice thing. So the question I was asked is, can a boy under bar mitzvah tie the strings, tie the tzitzis? So the Shulchan Aruch, I'll just run through some shittas about it. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Yud Dalid Sif Aleph writes as follows: Tzitzis she'asan ein Yehudi pasel. Goyim cannot hang the strings. Why? Because it says Daber b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael v'lei oivik kechavim. Goyim are excluded. Says the Shulchan Aruch, women could tie the strings because even though it says b'nei Yisrael, women are included. They're able to tie the strings. Says the Ramah. We said only men because you'll see. That's the Shulchan Aruch, that's the Svardim. But then says the Ramah, yesh machmirim. The minig is to be machmer, and we don't have women tie the strings. Now this is lichachila. B'di'evet, if they did, it's kosher. But lichachila, it's better for them not to. Why? So says the Mishabura, because b'nei Yisrael v'loi b'noi Yisrael, that the pasuk says b'nei Yisrael, which implies that only b'nei Yisrael should tie the strings and not women. Now because of this, and by the way, you should know, Rav Vadia says even Svardim have accepted the approach of Ashkenazim. They don't do it. I will say this though, like I said, if they do tie it, it's kosher. I was told, I don't know if this is accurate, but I was told that in Eretz Yisrael, there are many kehilas that with the tremendous amount of tzitzis needed for the soldiers, they were having women tying it because even though it's not chachila, you got to get it done. So that's all for women. Now the question is, what about children under bar mitzvah? So here's the question. What's the issue with women wearing it? With women tying it? If it's that because they're not obligated to wear tzitzis, so that's why they're excluded. So that would then children under bar mitzvah, they're boys, they have to wear tzitzis. So they would be included, at least they're in the parsha of chiyuv. But says the Mishabura, that's not the pshat. The Mishabura quotes the Magen Avraham. The Mishabura says as follows: Loi lasses lichachila tol sitz beged shel gadol aidei katan pachas mir gimel shanam. Lichachila, you should not have a child under bar mitzvah tie the strings because b'nei Yisrael v'lei b'nois Yisrael v'lei katane Yisrael. That's it. We don't do it. Now he does bring down that the Artzis Chaim, which is the Archas Chaim, which is the Malbim, I believe. The Malbim disagrees. There are poskim that disagree. Listen, if they did it and there's a person standing over them saying, say, l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, it's kosher. But lichachila, it's not lichachila. So what I've told people for when it comes to tying this, I said, we're going to try lichachila. I'd like to do this lichachila for the soldiers. They should wear tzitzis that are done. Mahudir l'cholades. If we find that there aren't people doing the mitzvah and we need people to do it, then we'll include children under bar mitzvah as well. But the point is, it's a machloikas whether children under bar mitzvah can tie the tzitzis. It's definitely not l'chachila. But yeah, it's fine. But it's a machloikas whether it's l'chachila, so it's probably best to have adult people do it, especially you're doing it for soldiers. You want it to be done as proper as you can. That's the first shaila. Now, the second shaila is interesting. The second shaila I was asked, I think it's davar pashut. I gave a source in case anybody wants sources, but I think it's a davar pashut. I was asked about someone who is adopted or a stepchild. Is an adopted child or a stepchild do they sit shiva for a parent? So again, it could be very common that it's not their biological parent, but they were raised by a step parent, they were raised by adopted parents. Do they have an inyan of sitting shiva? So the truth is, there is no chiyuv for them to sit shiva because it's not their biological parent. But they probably should, because there's an inyan of hakar satov. The person raised you, even though they're not biologically related to you, hakar satov. You should show hakar satov. It's like Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked a shaila, what's the obligation for a convert to show, what's the obligation of a convert to show respect to his parents that are not Jewish? Well, they're not related to him technically on a biblical perspective, they're not related. So there's a general rule from the Gemara that's la yoimru banu mikedusha chamur lekedusha kala. So let me explain what this means. This is not something I would explain. I was once watching like a documentary where there was this guy, I don't know, comedian, whatever it was. He was going to Israel and Tel Aviv, and he was talking about, he was interviewing Jews, and he interviewed this rabbi. And this rabbi, for some reason, on national television, wanted to describe this concept. What that means is, the Gemara says on a technical, this guy said on television, I have no idea why this would be out of all the things. It's like someone once called me and he said that the guy is giving a shiur to women, like high school girls, and he decided, out of all the halachos possible, he wanted to do the laws of Saita. I said, well, what are we doing for? But the Bekitzer, so kedusha chamur kedusha kala is that on a biblical level, a convert can marry his mother if they both convert, because they're not related. Okay. But Chazal said you shouldn't. Why? Because when they were both, let's say, Christian, no one would do such a thing. So now people are going to say, oh, you went from Christianity to Judaism. Oh, everything goes by Judaism, and it's a bizayon for Klal Yisrael to treat a convert in laws more lenient than they were in their previous religion. People shouldn't say they went from a chashiva religion, Christianity, to Judaism. That's what he decided to talk about. I don't know. So the Kitzer, so Rav Moshe Feinstein would say the same thing. An obligation of a convert to show kibbud of aim to his parents is not the same chiyuv that I have for my father. I have many details of halacha. There's a whole siman in Shulchan Aruch about it. They don't have that, but they have to show enough hakar satov that they have to show the same level of respect that a non-Jew has to show his parents. Because if you have to show less, then it's like when he was Christian, he had a level of honor that he honored his parents, but now he becomes a Jew, now nothing. So it's a bizayon for the religion of Yiddishkeit, and therefore you have to show at least what they had, which is, or Moshe Feinstein says, hakar satov. You have to be enough that you're not an ingrate. A non-Jew has, that's his level of chiv of kibbud of aim, and so too it is with an adopted parent or a ger for a convert. So the point is over here. So there's no chiv of kibbud of aim when they're not biologically your father, but hakar satov, they raised you, show hakar satov, and hakar satov dictates that for 1 week you stop your life and you should sit shiva, not a chiv, but you should sit shiva. But here's the details that are important. First of all the stringencies that we do, they don't have to necessarily keep. Meaning, if that, let's say a man is sitting shiva for his stepfather, adopted father, stepmother, adopted, whatever it is, he wants to sit shiva for the week. So b'chavod, he could sit shiva for the week. It's a nice thing to do, to show hakar satov, that he's not just going about his day, that loss mattered to him. If he wants to take a shower at night, he can take a shower at night. No one has to know. I wouldn't publicize this, because, but the details of stringencies don't necessarily apply. Also, you have to realize one thing. All the leniencies that we apply by Avelis do not apply to him, meaning, when someone's sitting Shiva, they're not learning Torah. They're not allowed to learn Torah. It's a week of Bittul Torah. But it's fine because they're not obligated to learn Torah. But if you're obligated to learn Torah, you got to learn Torah. Another halacha. I once gave this in a shiur of the misconception shiur. People don't realize the day that a person buries a loved one, lo yaleinu, you don't wear tefillin. The first day you don't wear tefillin. It's not like people think, oh, you're an oinen, that's why you don't wear tefillin. No. The Yom Rishon, there's no tefillin Yom Rishon. It's pe'er tachas efer, we don't wear tefillin the first day. So even if you bury someone, and yes, people are going to comment, I heard, I'm telling you Shulchan Aruch. There are maybe other shittas. Shulchan Aruch, basic halacha is the first day Now, if there's a period of time between the death and the burial, I'm talking, someone dies, they bury the next day, they bury that day. There's no tefillin that day, even after burial. Even though you're sitting, you're making brachas, you're davening Shachris, you're davening mincha ma'ariv as the chazan in your house. There's no tefillin that first day. But if you're sitting shiva for a step parent, you of course have to wear tefillin. You have to wear tefillin every day. You're obligated in all. There's no aninus, right? Aninus is from the time of death and the time of burial. You don't do positive mitzvahs. You don't make brachas. You don't daven. Of course, those do apply because the inyan of Avelis is not real Avelis; it's Hakaras Hatoiv Dik Avelis, and therefore you would, if you want a source, Rabbi Olbaum writes this in Sefer Chukei Chaim Daf Lamed Hey, but it's a davar pasha. One more halacha that I wanted to mention, and then I'll get into the topic that I was going to talk about, and that is the concept of. This is more Zalman's. This is going to bother him, which literally it's perfect. It is going to bother you. The concept of saying kaddish at the end of davening when there's no chiyuv. So you'll sometimes be in a shul where there's no avel. So the end of davening, everyone's like, "Ooh, okay, you saved some time, right? You have shishul yoim, kave, aleinu, you're out of there." Every once in a while, everyone will be like ready to go, and then someone on the back will start saying kaddish. So and Zalman will naturally roll his eyes. I don't think you care at this point. But what's the deal with that? So the truth is, there's a Ramah in Siman Kuf Lamed Beis. Look at the words of the Ramah. Might be machloikis between the Ramah. The Ramah says as follows in Siman Kuf Lamed Beis. Oimrim kaddish yasam achar aleinu. We say kaddish yasam after aleinu. Now, after aleinu is because the Ramah was Ashkenaz. So they did aleinu at the end and then kaddish. Our kaddish yasam is after shir shel yom, not after the ikar one. Nusach Sfarad says a lot of kaddishim, but the main kaddish for Ashkenaz is after aleinu. By Nusach Sfarad is after shir shel yom, and after kaveh is a kaddish derabanan. But the main kaddish yasam is after shir shel yom. Says the Ramah, we say kaddish. Afilu ein yasam beis knesses. Even if there's no one sitting saying avelos for that year, yoy maroisai. Someone should say it. Mi she'en lo yaveim. Someone that lost a parent should say it, because there's an inyan to end davening with a kaddish. And the Ramah says, even if you have parents, you could still say it if they don't mind. Now, I can tell you right that they mind. We don't do that anymore. But I will say this: Chassidim have the minig that while they will not say kaddish yasam if you have parents living, they will say kaddish derabanan after kaveh, even if you have parents living. I've seen this many, many times. Chassidim will say it because they say the whole inyan of not saying, meaning, according to the Ramah, there's an inyan to say kaddish at the end of davening. Someone should say kaddish. There's two kaddishim that Nusach Sfarad has. We have kaddish yasam after shir shel yom and kaddish derabanan, not after aleinu, kaddish yasam after shir shel yom and kaddish derabanan after kaveh. So kaddish yasam, you could only say practical minig of Klal Yisrael. You only say it if your parents are not alive, or if you lost one parent. If you have both parents living, thank God, you do not say it because it's an ayin hara, and they'll be upset, and we don't do it. But kaddish derabanan is a kaddish derabanan. The minhag Chassidim is to say it. Either the chazan says it, someone in the kehillah says it. I've seen it many times. Chassidim will say it. But the point is, someone should say kaddish yasam. Why? So the Mishnah Berurah explains over there. The kaddish yasam at the end of davening is a part of tefillah. It's a part of davening. Chazal just, what they did is they said, listen, instead of the chazan saying it, because if the chazan says it, he's just going to have in mind all of Klal Yisrael. Let a yasam say it. Because there's a big inyan for a yasam to say kaddish during the 11 months after someone passes away, which, by the way, just very agavdik. What's the inyan of saying kaddish? So there's a ma'isa it's in the Zayir Chadash, and it's brought down in other midrashim. Yaku Yosef on Kiva Rav Aim brings it down. It's a Mardik ma'isa, very, very bekitzer. The story goes that Rav Akiva was once sitting. It's a very famous ma'isa. Rav Akiva was once sitting and learning, and he sees a man running in front of him, and the man is not dressed, and the man is blackened with soot. Not black as in skin color, but blackened with soot. And he sees this guy running, schlepping wood on his shoulders. So he's obviously startled by this. So he starts yelling at the guy, well, what's the story? So the guy basically tells him, I'm not alive anymore. I'm a soul. And I did every Aveira in the book. And my punishment is every day I have to chop wood and they burn me in the wood. As he says. So Rav Akiva says, did you ever hear from the malachim that are in charge of you any eitzah for you? Is there anything I could do for you? So he said, I have one son who's not religious. He doesn't go to shul. He might have been married to a guy at the time. I don't remember, there's different Grisais in the Gemara. In the Medrash, he said, listen, I heard if you can get him to go to shul daven be the chazan, and say kaddish for me, it'll help me a lot. That's what he said. So the Maisa goes that Rav Akiva got the son, he didn't want to, he talked him out of it. Finally, Bekitza, he got him to go to shul, started having him say chaz, be chazan, say kaddish, and by the way, according to one Girsa, and this is the Ramah, say maftir. By the way, get maftir. That's also a big Indian during the year of Avelis, to get maftir. Although practically I would advise a shul not doing this, because I've seen shuls that they only give the Avel maftir for the year if he's a wealthy guy in the shul, and that bothers everybody else in the shul. So, but the point is an Indian to get maftir if you can. And the Gemara goes that the neshama came to Rav Akiva and he thanked him so much. He says, when he started going into shul, they stopped burning me. And then when he was chazan, they elevated me out of the punishment. And then when I said kaddish, they took me to Gan Eden. A big chashav azach. That's the source of kaddish. By the way, two ha'aras from this ma'isa that you see. Rav Akiva could have said kaddish. This is Rav Akiva, the Gadol Dar. He could have asked Rav Akiva. Vais d'chayis, there's an Indian for the family member that he could be poil more, he could accomplish more than even the great Rav Akiva. But secondly, you see from the story, and this is a shita of Rav David Feinstein. I'm not saying this is universally accepted. I rather don't think most people don't do this, but it's a shita of Rav David. I spoke to Eddie about this recently. Rav David's shita is, you see from this Gemara, that the Indian of Kaddish and being Chazan are two independent concepts. Both help the neshama in different ways. Most people, right, we only say Kaddish for 11 months. The 12th month, we don't say Kaddish. Why? Because the Gemara says, although you're an Avel, you're in mourning for 12 months, right? You can't go to weddings for 12 months for a parent, but we only say Kaddish for 11 months. Why? Because the Gemara says, Mishpat Rishon beGehenim Yud Beis Chodesh. Only Rishon go to Gehenim for 12 months. Non-Rishon only go to Gehenim for 11 months. So because only Rishon go to Gehenim for the 12th month, you want to stop by the 12th month, because if you're saying Kaddish in the 12th month, then it's like proclaiming to everyone, I believe that the person who passed away was a Rasha, which God forbid. So we stop after 11 months. But the point is, saying being Chazan, you could do in the 12th month. Why not? So what do you call it? So Rav David Feinstein Shita, most people, when they've done 11 months, they just stop. They stop being Chazan, they stop saying Kaddish. Now, probably the reason why I stopped saying being Chazan is because it's very, very difficult to be Chazan 3 times a day. It's not an easy thing to do. No one would say that it's an easy thing to do. Rav David Feinstein advised people that during the 12th month, why you don't say Kaddish anymore, because that's Ma'orer, the Mishpat in Rishayim Gehenim Yud Beis Chodesh. It implies that the person who passed away was a Rasha. Why can't you be Chazan? It helps him. And if you could be Chazan, why not? And that was that Shita. Now, your Chiyuv does not push off others, right? There is a whole list of order, right? Shloishim beats the year, Yartzai beats Shloishim, 2 Shloishim, you go with whoever is the main, his shul beats guest, whatever, there's a whole order. None of that. You won't win any of that when you're in the 12th month. But if there's no one around to be chazan and you could just step forward, if it helps the neshama, why not? Okay, so that was what I wanted to mention. By the way, whether there's a chiyuv to say kaddish at the end of davening or just a minig, a nice minig, Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Vosner feel it's a chiyuv. So if this would mean that if, God forbid, someone lost a parent and you're in shul and you could say kaddish, you should say kaddish. That is the shita of Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Vosner based on the Ramah. Rav Elyashiv said it's a nice minig, not a chiyuv. But a nice minig, it's a nice minig. So if you could, it's a nice thing to do. But again, like I said, Baruch, I mean, I can't. It's hard for me to push people. I think I can't do it. So, but it's definitely something that it's not made up. That's my point. It's not like an annoyance for the tzibur. It might be annoying, but it's to fulfill the sheet of the Ramah. Because really, the chazan should be saying it, but they just left it for yasim. If there's no yasim, let someone else say it. So the truth is, I saw the Isha Yisrael brings down the to do by the end of Mincha Ma'ariv. I don't think I've ever seen that. But the Isha Yisrael says, if the Ramah's reasoning is correct, which is that you're supposed to end davening off with a kaddish, then it would apply to Mincha Ma'ariv as well. I've never seen that. Maybe you have. I've never seen it. I've seen a Shachris. I've never seen a Mincha Ma'ariv. So I don't want to.
Shabbos is after the Yom?
It's after Shishal Yom, and for Ashkenaz it's after Aleinu. You don't have to do 2 kaddishim. It will be after Shishal Yom, 1 kaddish. Does it?
It's not done outside of shul in a intermittent.
What do you mean? Like in the street?
Yeah.
Like I guess it would be the same. It's not a din of the tzibur. It's a din of mincha. Mincha requires a shachris requires a kaddish at the end. I would assume that it's the same. Again, like I said, it's an Indian. Okay, so what I wanted to do, again, if there's any questions, good. If not, we have a few minutes. I started jotting down. I wanted to cover a topic, like to cover it well. I have a lot on it. I'm not going to spend too much time. But the Indian of names, naming after people, I get asked this a lot, especially, because you have there's a great-grandfather, there's a tzaddik, the great-grandfather wasn't religious, they want me to name after this. Just to cover a quick synopsis of the concept of names, some of the details of it, because I think it comes up a lot. So I'll mention some. I hope to not... just remember when I go in that if you didn't do what I'm going to say, I'm sure it's fine. Like, you understand, like, if you're not supposed to name after this person, and you did... Okay, I'm sure it'll be okay. So, very bekitzer. The first thing to remember whenever you're dealing with naming children is that there's a sefer bris avos. A sefer bris avos simin chesay simim zayin. It's a very famous sheet of the Arizal. Like, what's the Arizal? The Arizal says as follows. He says, "Kol hashem sheba'olam ein b'mikra." The names of a person are not coincidence. It's like people think. It's not a coincidence. Rather, it is the name of a person. His entire tafkid is somehow found in his name, and a person's name is like a small prophecy that the parents are able to look at a baby and somehow sum up his entire tafkid in that name is a small nevuah. He calls it a nevuah ketana from the Arizal. That's it. Just to realize that a name is a very chashuv izach. Because of this, as we're going to see, there are details of who you name after, who you don't. There's a common thing amongst secular Israelis. It's not crazy common, but I've heard it, where they'll name after Rishoim historically. Like Nimrod. Nimrod is the famous Nimrod. As a Nimrod means Merida. It means you're connecting the neshama of the baby to a rebellious person who tried to kill Avram Avinu multiple times. So that's not a good idea. Why? Because the name is not just a name of how you call someone. His entire essence is bound to that name. And if you give him the name of a Rasha, you're binding that child to a Rasha. You give him a tzaddik name, then you give him... Now that doesn't mean, by the way, that if you're named after a Rasha, the kid's going to be a Rasha. Because the same way, if you name after a tzaddik, it doesn't mean he's going to be a tzaddik. It just means you're giving him a leg up. He could always override that thing, right? You're giving him a leg up. You're giving him a little bit of help. So I want to run through a couple concepts. Again, happy to take any questions. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, this is Davar Pasha. I just give a source for it. In Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud Beis, the Rebbe had a statement that is that because of this Arizal, that it's a nevuah, the only ones who should be naming the child and the only ones who should give opinions about naming the child are the parents. That is it. My mother had a great line recently. I was talking to her about someone was involved in a certain shaila. They want a certain name, but the parents have other ideas. And my mother had a great line. She said, "The parents got to name once already. Now it's their turn. That's it. This is not the grandparents. This is not the in-laws. The parents decide. That's it. And the main thing is shalom. But it's a nevuah katana. So yes, is it nice to name after Uncle Leo and Uncle this and Uncle that? Of course, it's nice if you can. But it's not up to them. The parents have to do what they think is best. That's the main objective because it's a nevuah katana. Okay, just to run through a couple concepts. Who has the right to name the first child? The father or the mother? Right? So it's a machlokes Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Sfardim, Rav Ovadia says the father gets the first child and the mother gets the second child. That's the minhag among Sfardim. Listen, this doesn't. This sounds very old school. That. The first one goes to the father, and the one goes... But there is a concept of kedima. So you have it a lot of times where there's a baby boy born to a family, and they already decided they're naming after a grandparent. They're comfortable with the grandparents. They're both grandparents on either side are not alive. So who wins? Obviously, you could always make shalom and take all the combination names, but they don't want to combine the names. They want exactly like the name of the grandfather. Okay, there's such a concept. It's not crazy to want to name exactly after the grandparent, because if the grandparent's soul is bound in his name, you want to go with it. I understand. So who has kedima? Rav Ovadia has a tshuva where he says the first one goes to the father, the second one goes to the mother. That is not the minhag of Ashkenaz. The minhag of Ashkenazim, as I'm pretty sure everyone here is Ashkenaz, said, the mom. The mom gets the first name. Rav Chaim Kanievsky says the reason being is because she just went through the difficulty of childbirth, so she earned it. She earned the first one, and the first one goes to the mother's name, and the second one goes to the father's name. Again, this is just to try to avoid fighting if there are some minhagim already built in. But I don't think it really works, because I'm pretty sure they're going to fight anyway. But you should know that the first one goes to the mother, the second one goes to the father. By the way, there is a minhag brought down from the Rebbe used to say, brought down from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that there's a minhag not to tell anyone about the pregnancy for a certain period of time. I could tell you next time about that. But there is, just to, again, the concept, keep it within the parents. The parents decide, no one else. Okay. So now when do you name the baby boy and when do you name the baby girl? So we all know the baby boy is at the bris. Now, unfortunately, you have a common situation is, let's say the baby's not healthy. Okay, the baby's a preemie, whatever it is. They're not going to have a bris at 8 days. And Adarabba, not only are they not going to have a bris at 8 days because the baby's not healthy enough, it's not just a Billy Rubin problem. The baby needs tefillah. So what most people will do is they just say Tinuk Ben, whatever. They don't give a name. It's not so pashut. The truth is, Rav Moshe and the Satmarov, their shita was that if the baby is the bris is not going to happen. While it's nice to give the baby the name at the bris because that's when the arla is removed and then more spiritually, very nice. The baby needs tefillas. It's better to have a name for the tefillas. Give it early. Ramosha Shita was you don't even have to wait for 8 days. If you know the baby's not healthy and the baby's not going to have a bris for months, give the baby right now the next Kriyas HaTorah, give him a name, so that way people can daven after that name. That was the Shita of Ramosha. The Stipler was not a fan of that. The Stipler disagreed. The Stipler felt that no, the baby does not get a name until the bris. That was the. So that's again. The point is, lo yaleinu. If this happens, ask a shaila because davening for a name again. The name binds you. That's Rabbi Olba once told me that when it comes to because the name is so chashiv, that's why changing a name is not a pashit thing. I can tell you this. There's a shita of Rav Yaakov Hillel. Okay, I'm a big fan of Rav Yaakov Hillel. So Rav Yaakov Hillel shita is like this. Let's say there's a concept that you add a name when someone's really, really sick. That's the more common application of changing someone's name. Is you don't change it, you add a name. Rav Yaakov Hillel actually disagrees. He was actually of the opinion that if you're going to change the name, like change it entirely, like it was adding going to do. He actually is an opinion of his ashita was to completely change it. The argument against that. So I once spoke to Rabbi Olban. Rabbi Olban said he quoted some Rishonim, I forgot who, but he said that the argument against it is sometimes people will they'll change the name. And then the person will pass away. He says they don't realize it's because they changed the name. They cut away any source. The only thing keeping them alive was that first name. That first name was flawed. But so there's so it's taka. The name binds you to that person's body. So it could be giving a name even before the bris is something that might be worthwhile. Again, if someone's sick, ask a shaila. Ask someone, not just ask a shaila, by the way. For these things, ask a poisik who's either a Litvish Poisek Hadar, or you want someone who's aware of Kabbalah concepts, like there's an Assorted. You understand? You want someone who doesn't just know halacha, but he also knows what's going on in the neshama a little bit. Okay, a couple more things, and then we'll finish up. Just a few more minutes. What about the daughter? When is the daughter's name given? So obviously we know the minig is to do it by Kriyas HaTorah. The question is, which Kriyas HaTorah? So the Bnei Yissaschar shita is that you should do it by the first Kriyas HaTorah after she's born. Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Mincha, doesn't matter. You don't have to wait for Shabbos, just do the first Kriyas HaTorah. And that's the minig of many Hasidim. The Avnei Nezer disagreed. The Avnei Nezer said you wait for Shabbos. And that's the minig of other Hasidim. If you look, the Netta Gavriel has a whole list. He's got Sans, Kloisenberger, Bells, and this one. He got the Rachman Shriv, whatever. There's a whole to do. Practical halacha, I've told people, listen, if you want to do it at the first naming, that's beautiful. If there's a reason to wait, like the reason is my wife is unhappy with me doing it, she wants to do it at my shul, or my parents want to be there and I'm not ready, we don't know if the name. Okay, don't stress. You wait for Shabbos. Yesh al milas wants to wait for Shabbos. Again, there's different minhagim either way. So what if you never do that? Never got a name by a bris? Or by the Sefer Torah? So I'll tell you like this. So so I'll tell you like this. I've seen many videos, Paskin business videos. I've seen many videos of people going to the Rebbe. There's a whole collage I could send you of, especially amongst Russian women, they did not have, Kriyas HaTorah naming, and they, said to the Rebbe, I don't have a Jewish name. And he said, well, what's your secular name? And they said, Rose, and he said, okay, Rachel, and that was it. So it definitely could be done outside of a Sefer Torah. The minig is to do it by a Sefer Torah, but it's evident from those stories that he did it right then and there. So it can be applied even if it's not at a Sefer Torah, but the minig is obviously to give the girl's name by a Sefer Torah, and there's Kabbalistic reasons for that as well, but obviously if the person didn't have it, then, you call yourself that. That's also a form of a name. I will say this though, by the way, for the record, just completely agav, I didn't know I'd be getting into this. if you change your name, let's say someone's sick, they add a name, or just they become more religious, so they completely change their name. You got to ask a shaila. Is a machlekes? I believe it's a Moshe Sternbach and a Vosner. You might have to change a ksuba. It's something. A woman got married, and in her ksuba, she didn't have a Jewish name, so they called her Sandra or whatever. So she wrote Sandra, and then she gets become more religious. Now she's Sarah. She's Sarah. I don't want to be Sarah. Beautiful. It's machlekes. You might have to change the ksuba. You might have to update the ksuba because that name is no longer relevant. It's a machlokes. You have to ask a shaila, and the ksuba is not something to mess with. You got to make sure the ksuba is up to date and done properly. But it's something you have to ask a shaila. It's a machlokes, and a shaila must be asked. We'll just end with this. Okay, I probably shouldn't do this. You know what? I'll do it. Why not? What's the difference? I'll say this: ask a shaila. Rabbi Weinberger once gave a shiur on this. I remember he said this, and like all the hands were being raised, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm sure it's all fine for everyone here." There is a concept that when a lot of times you have a baby, that you'll want to name after a family member, but sometimes people will name after a family member that had a different sex than the baby. I would say this: like, you have a little baby girl, and you want to call her Mindela, after a grandfather named Mendel. That's not advisable because Al Pi Kabbalah, this is from the Sefer Sharbir Hazahav. It's not a very wise thing to do. At least many poskim are against it. Tzitz Eliezer was not a fan. Rosh Hashanah was not a fan, because when you have a baby girl and you give her the name of a boy, you're connecting her neshama to that of a male. And we want them to be very feminine for giving birth, and it's not the best thing. By the way, what's interesting is the opposite. The Sfarim do not have a problem with calling a boy after a girl. That they don't have an issue with, because I guess that just makes them a little more feminine and makes them nicer. But I will say this: we're seeing the world now. I don't know. I want to keep the sex of the baby just more separate and defined. But that is not as big of an issue. But naming a girl after a boy is not something I would do. Now I will say this: that's only if you're actually naming it after that. If you had a grandmother named Mindy and she was named after a grandfather, that's fine, because you're not naming after the guy, you're naming after your grandmother. But it's just something to be nisbaina. Now, if you did, I'm sure it's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. There are a lot of rules when it comes to names to try to help. Listen, Al Pi the Arizal, it's good for a woman to have a name. I definitely shouldn't be saying this, but from the Arizal, it's good for a woman to name her with a letter Hey in her name. It'll help for childbirth. That's something, hey, from Heroya. Now, that doesn't mean, that's why the Arizal said that Rachel Imenu had a hard time, and that's why her midwife was Bilhah, 2 Heys, one for her, one for Rachel. Now, does that mean that every woman with a Hey, every Leah is going to have children, and every Rachel's not? No. You'll have Leahs that have a hard time having children, and you'll have Rachels that have a very easy time having children. It's just one of these things where you want to make it easier and you want to help it. So one of the things to just, for the future, again, what was done in the past, I'm sure will be successful and everything will be matzliach. But in the future, when you figure out the names, try to, girls after girls, guys after guys. Guys after girls is not such an issue, but a girl after a guy, I would. Again, the rugged trava was makel, so you have what to rely on if the rugged trava going. But if possible to be machmer, I would try to keep it clean in that regard. All right, we'll stop here. Maybe next time we'll talk about. There is one last shaila I would talk about, not now. Maybe next time, if there's an interest, to talk about naming after someone who, Loyalena, we just had on October 7th, an astronomical amount of Jews who were killed, and they were killed young, Loyalena, and naming after them. Is that an issue? I'm sure it'll be fine, but what it hates is, the main shaila that maybe we'll talk about next time is, because I daven ma'ariv soon. I'll tell you one quick shaila the person deal with. What if the person that you're naming after wasn't religious, or he wasn't observant? You have a grandfather. He wasn't religious. He was a good person, but not religious. Is it an issue? So there were opinions, or Moshe Sternbach Shita was that when you're naming after somebody, you're not naming after their religious actions, you're naming after their midos. So he said it's not really important to find out how religious they were. You have to find out what type of person they were. If they were good people, then it's fine. If they were a bad person, the guy was a jerk, even if he was Shomer Shabbos, that's not the best fan. But I will say this, practical eitzes, if you're going to name after someone who's not, let's say, observant, there's always 3 eitzes. And that is, you slightly change the name, you add a name, or the easiest eitzah is, let's say the person you want to name after, his name was Moshe. Moshe was your grandfather, he wasn't religious at all. See, here's what you do. When you're telling the Gabbai the name at the bris, here's what you have in mind. You think to yourself, Hashem, if the baby should be named after my grandfather Moshe, then Moshe is who I'm naming after. And if this is not good for him, it's Moshe Rabbeinu. And you know what? No one will ever know except for the father. The mother will think that she named after her grandfather Moshe. The mother-in-law will be happy, everybody happy. Do they have to know you thought about Moshe Rabbeinu? No one has to know. You don't have to be the one who tells them that ever also. You just it's just an eitzah just to avoid all problems. That would also be a way to avoid. If you want to name after, we'll maybe deal with this next time. It's because it is fascinating about how you spell the name Akiva and Gedalyahu and Yeshaya, right? Yeshayahu is the Navi, but we always name him Yeshaya. So according to the Marshal, it's because we don't name after someone who was killed. And Yeshayahu Navi was killed by his grandson Menashe. So because of that, we just changed. It's a different person entirely. So there is an eitzah. If you're going to name after someone who had a difficult life or was killed, especially killed young, there would be an eitzah. Just again, you don't have to tell them who you're thinking of. You think of someone else. But we'll talk about this maybe next time. We'll daven Ma'ariv now if that's okay.